deficit disorder. And just before we get started, I just wanted to remind my lower school classroom reps that we will be having a spring fling meeting immediately following this presentation. So if everyone could stay, I would appreciate it. I promise I won't keep you more than 30 minutes, I hope. Also, we appreciate Dr. Leska coming out this morning. Dr. Leska's specialty is pediatrics and pediatric and adolescent psychiatry. He is currently on staff at the Cumberland County Mental Health Center. And Dr. Leska, thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Crystal. And actually, thank you all for having us, or having me. First of all, it's a privilege. And the fact that you're all here is a testament to your children and your desire to help your children and help them succeed in your school system. Over the last 25 years that I've been in practice, I think my perception of ADD has changed. And hopefully this will be informal, but informative. Probably the best way to approach this is, there's a small handout, and we're not going to quiz you. But if you ask, what is ADD? Okay, ADD is really a disease process that does affect a child and an adult's ability to function. So it does impact on their attention, it impacts on their concentration. I think as a parent, though, most of us don't realize early on that our child has something. You know, we think he's Johnny, or we think she's Susie, and they're just wonderful kids. And the truth is, all kids are wonderful, but if you have an ADD child, you probably have moments when you're saying a prayer of patience and asking for forgiveness. For yourself, of course. So, you know, what is ADD? First of all, there's not a single disease out there. You know, we can call it ADHD, but if you took 100 of us, you'd probably find that 70 have this version, 25 have this version, 2 have this version, another one has this version. So ADD is a label, okay? It's like going out in the parking lot and saying they're the cars. Well, when you say ADD, really, it's a label that covers a whole spectrum of children. The trouble is, most of us assume ADD is the ADHD part. And if you go to the preschool, if you go to church on Sunday, if you go to Harris Teeter, the child that's sort of jumping out of the cart, the child that's tearing up the aisle, most of us recognize that child and sort of have concern for the parent and just wish the child would slow down. But the hyper child is just one aspect. And what we'll do today is we'll talk about the whole continuum. So ADHD is a medical diagnosis. I truly believe that if you look at the research, and the research is actually done, they use PET scans, they do a lot of different studies to show that there are actually different areas of perfusion, meaning if you look at the brain, they can show that the right frontal temporal areas has decreased perfusion. So we really recognize that there's something CNS going on. On the other hand, most people see the ADD child as busy, out of control, lazy, a daydreamer. So those are different labels that are applied to us. So ADHD is a label, it is a medical diagnosis. It is something that should affect a child. So if a child wiggles, if a child has one day that he's bored, that's not ADD. ADD really should cause dysfunction, and the dysfunction should be more than 6 months. So if sometimes a mom and dad are having a difficult time and the child perceives stress, well, if that child suddenly has ADD symptoms, I would not call that ADD. You know, sometimes in our community we have a lot of parents who get deployed. So if a parent gets deployed and Johnny's academic performance changes, I would not call that ADD. So the secret is ADD should be a series of symptoms. It could be inattentive, it could be hyperactive, it could be impulsive. Some children, God bless them, have all of them. Some have subsets. The one that I worry most about are the inattentive children, which frequently come into school, sit down and are quiet, and then develop the academic dwindles. Their grades start to go from A's to A's and a B to B's and 2 C's, and then if we let it go, it'll be 3 C's and 2 D's and maybe 1 F by the time they're seniors. What we hope to do, though, today is then help you understand what we can do to help. Okay? So ADHD, the truth is they probably can't do a blood test. It's not an X-ray. Even our psychological tests that they have are really just, that piece of paper really is just as effective as a person who fills it out. So if you have a parent who just thinks his child is horrible and puts 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, usually this, you know, they have They have scales from 0 to 3 in terms of how busy the child is. But it's really a clinical diagnosis that causes dysfunction. I do have ADD. Never knew it. My dad thought I was lazy. My teacher in 4th grade looked at me. I went to a little Catholic school in New York City in Queens, and she said, "Johnny, you're a good boy, but." She said, "But." She says, "You forget things, you lose things, you procrastinate." We lie. I'm embarrassed to say as a kid, "Dad, Johnny, did you do it?" "Yeah, Dad, I did it." And we don't want to get in trouble, so we fib or we lie. As a Catholic, it was a lie, and I had to go to confession. But unfortunately, it's real, and it does cause good kids to make really bad decisions. And it makes great parents have challenging times, too. So when you talk about ADHD, they're not going to find an abnormal MRI. There's not going to be a blood test. If we wanted to spend the money, they could do PET scans. I don't know what facility does it. Probably Duke, Chapel Hill, probably have a PET scan, and they can do the test, and they can charge you $4,000 or $5,000. But at the end of it, they can't really definitively say why your child has it. Okay? There are 2 chemicals generally involved, dopamine and norepinephrine. I'm not going to focus on them today, except to say that most of the medicines that we do use try to address those 2 chemicals, dopamine and norepinephrine. And sometimes we block what we call the receptor to try to increase the level. Sometimes we give a medicine that causes more dopamine and norepinephrine to be released. The bottom line is, much of the help for ADD is not medicine. Medicine is like a pair of shoes. It can make our trip a lot softer, it can make it a lot more comfortable. But the child has to do a lot of things to change, parents have to do things to change, and the school system has to understand how they can help. If you say, "John, tell us about ADD." When I was a pediatrician at Womack, back in the early 80s, parents would come in and they would tell me their child was out of control. And I'd look at the parents and look at the kid, and the kid would sit there very quietly and patiently, and I'd wonder, as a doctor, I was always looking for the hyper child. And a lot of times, if the child had a strict teacher, the child would hold the behavior in check. So the diagnosis is really a challenging one that requires communication. But the most common presentation in the early years, so we'll do it in the continuum, the parents that come to us when the child is 3, 4, and 5 is going to be the ADD hyperactive. So if you look at the list, these are the children who can't sit still, who are fidgeting, who are tapping. You put them in the car seat and they're wiggling out. You take them to Harris Teeter and they're jumping out of the car. When they like something, whether it be Nintendo or Xbox or DS, they can do that for 3, 4 hours. And most parents will say, "Well, my child's not hyper, he's just whatever." The tragedy is ADD is not that they can't attend. ADD is not that they can't sit still. They can, but they have much more challenge if they're not doing something that's important to them. So, a lot of our athletes, you'll find if you tell them they can't play varsity sports unless they keep their grades up, even if they're not on meds, they somehow find the focus to keep their grades up. And as soon as the varsity season's over, it's not uncommon for that child to have a B during the season and then drop to D's and F's off the season, and that happens routinely. So consistency in performance is hard. But the most common presentation for children is hyperactive early on. The inattentive, the impulsive, that tends to show up depending on the parent. Most children, if you look at the disease process, most of us who have ADD have children who have ADD. And I have 2 wonderful kids. They've done very well at Chapel Hill. Both of them are blessed to have a little bit of the inattentive ADD. Dad was neurotic enough and provided a lot of structure, and I have a great wife that tolerated the 3 of us. The children did very well. But I think depending on the home structure, the ADD can be worse or better depending on how we structure it. So hyperactive children, most common to see early. If you have one of those children, you probably sought help with your pediatrician by the time the child was 4 or 5. The trouble when I was a pediatrician is we were taught to say he's all boy, or don't worry, she's just a curious little girl. So a lot of times we physicians did not facilitate helping you. Now, it doesn't mean that we had to medicate your child, but we might have been able to provide a lot of education to support that. In the middle school years, and I shared with some of your colleagues or friends here that for me, I had trouble in 4th grade. And what happened in 4th grade, and at the academy may happen in 2nd and 3rd grade, the teachers stopped being polite. Actually, polite's the wrong term. They're always polite, but they stopped enabling me. So first, second, and third grade, when John forgot something,